Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Bowmen podcast coming at you live here from our archery shop in Virginia. We got a very special guest today. We got Mr. Travis Turner himself from the Bone Collector. Say hi to everyone out there. Thanks for coming on, Travis.
Hey,
We
everybody.
appreciate it. We
For
got the
having me.
usual. Oh, yeah. It's a pleasure and an honor. We got the usual crew here, Mr. Cedric O'Hara, battling a cold front out there in Missouri. Glad he can make it out of the tree this morning. We got Josh and Troy from Ohio. They're battling the lull out there.
Yep.
I saw you running out of that rainstorm yesterday. I know it
was a mess.
got rained on pretty hard, huh?
We got called sissies too.
It'd have been a funny GoPro video because I was running downhill through the corn trying to get out of that storm.
I was completely soaked. I got back in the truck. It was fun.
That came from me. You know, I'm from South Texas. Rain doesn't bother us.
Yeah, you don't get much.
Yeah,
I thought
I know.
about sticking it out for about 10 seconds until the tree started swaying back and forth. And
I was sitting
Were you in
down.
your saddle though? Did you at least swing a little bit?
And that makes it worse if they start swinging because your feet come off the tree and then you go back and
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
not for me. We got Mr. Noel Evans from Final Descent up here on the top. He's at his
y'all
local
doing?
archery shop because he couldn't make it in time, but thanks for joining in.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so we're gonna kick it off here with a little Q&A for Mr. Travis here. Get into some archery, some arrow setups, bow setups, but just kind of starting it off here. I had a question from the video that came out that you put together with, I believe it was Hoyt that put it together for you about your history and lifestyle.
Yeah.
So one thing that it didn't touch on is how did you start off with Hoyt? How did that come about? Was it something that you just shot from the beginning and that was your choosing and went from there? How did that evolution happen?
Well, I owned my own archery shop. We opened it up in 1994, and I shot professionally and competitively, early on. So I shot for Browning for 1990, 91, 92, and 93, and then went to PSE. PSE was doing a huge thing back then in 94, 95, and then part of 96, but they were matching, like if you won whatever you won in the top 3 positions of your class, they would match the prize money. And back then prize money was like for the world championship was $50,000 back in the early 90s. It's nowhere near that much now. I mean, like the world champion will only win, $2,500, something like that. But back then that was really huge. So I'd shot for PSC for a while, and then I think they were going broke paying a lot of people for winning like that. So they actually cut the whole contingency and pro staff program in mid-year. So halfway through the 96 season, me owning a store and I sold Hoyt, we started our partnership. I'd always been a fan of Hoyt. I consider Hoyt one of the top tier and most innovative archery manufacturers there is. It seems like there's 3 or 4 archery manufacturers that does all the plowing and leading the way and innovations. And then it seems like the other bow companies kind of follow in there and has been for years. So I started shooting them in 96 and have, been shooting for Hoyt ever since then.
Awesome. Well, that's a great story. Yeah, Hoyt's definitely been up there in the innovation process. So with their new series, their carbon lines, I see you stick to the aluminum most of the time. Is that preference or just you're used to it? What are your thoughts on their carbon?
I like the advantages to both. I like the carbon for the lightweightness, and especially you guys that hunt in the cold areas, it's warm to the touch. So, it doesn't actually, like if you're having to get a bucks coming in, you got to hold the bow for 30 minutes and it's 20 degrees, it doesn't sap the heat out of your hand. So that there's an advantage to the carbon. And a lot of people say, well, I like shooting a heavy bow, and a heavy bow does actually seems to perform better, as far as aiming and shock and everything. But the cool thing about starting with a lightweight bow with all the stabilizer systems and offsets and things like that is you can take a light bow and you can put the weight distributed where you want to. Whereas if you start with a heavy bow, you just got a heavy bow and then you're just going to manipulate the weight heavvier. So that's another cool factor to the carbon. I've shot the aluminum just because of one, I wanted, maybe Hoyt's going to slap me on the wrist for saying this, but there's the same geometry. The carbon versus the aluminum, it's the same geometry. They're building the same exact bow, same string, same limbs, cams, everything. And the geometry of the riser is the same. The only difference is carbon versus aluminum. Now, and the price difference is, $600 difference. Now, can I say that the carbon bow is a little better bow? I think it is, but to the Billy Joe lunch bucket or the average guy, I can't sit here and tell him to spend $600 more. That'll buy a whole lot of accessories and broadheads and such. I wanted to be true and shoot the aluminum, as well. And it performs equally as well too. So it's really, I flip flop back and forth. I've got one of each one set up.
I tend to go to the aluminum as well. I shot the RX5 for a while. Loved that platform. And then the VTM just seemed to be better in stability for me and grip wise as well. And I've also heard some things with Hoyt and their platform. It's interesting to hear that it's the same geometry, because I was looking at that side by side in the shop and it's like measurements are almost identical. It's just the cuts and the
Yeah.
layouts that's different. So that's pretty cool. And a good innovation there as well. And that carbon, man, I'll tell you though, it's 100% right. That warm to the touch, it's pretty cool to see that on those cold days. It's frost everywhere and the bow's just sitting there and there's nothing, nothing wrong with it, nothing out there.
Yeah.
So
This year is a little different, meaning like they took, they're an inch different axle to axle. So there is a
Mhm.
little bit different so that you can fine tune the apex of the string so that your anchor point, because we've noticed by, you asking people when you're fine tuning your anchor point, the angle of the string, there's a comfort value or comfort. I always like a longer axle to axle. So I like a more straight up and down type string rather than being laid over more like this. So they've made it to where they're not exactly the same. They're really, really close so that you can actually choose between 4 different platforms as to the angle of the string that you like for your anchor point.
and that's awesome. I noticed too with that, it seems to be easier to shoot a longer axle to axle with that more straight up string than it is shorter. Is there truth to that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's personal preference on the way it's anchoring, but there's a couple reasons why I think, and my background being a tournament archer, I like a
Mhm.
longer axle to axle bow just because it seems to be more forgiving. There's not quite as much of a pinch. Even shooting a D loop, you don't have quite as much of a pinch on your knocking system, as well as the aiming part of it. I tell people that you can just balance it a lot better because it is longer axle. Usually when you have a longer axle to axle, you don't have to wrap the cam as much. And also, in my opinion, a smaller in diameter cam is more forgiving because this is going to go deep right here. But like with a short axle to axle, you have to have a large cam or a large take up to accommodate the draw length. Well, when you have a long axle to axle, it doesn't take as big a cam. So therefore the cam's not as big. So you don't have to have as much take up. So therefore the cam is usually smaller. So it's spending less time in the track. And then also the closer that you can get the outside of the cam to the center of the axle, the less wheel lean that you have, because it's working off of leverage. If it's a big cam and it's up here from the axle, then any lean you have is going to be magnified greatly. Whereas the smaller the cam, the less lean that you'll have. So all those things adding up, splitting hairs, equates to more forgiveness, in my opinion.
No, 100%. That's just great information there for everyone, and a lot of info that people don't realize when they're selecting a product out there. So that's pretty awesome. Let's jump into a little bit about arrows here. I know the boys are chomping at the bit to talk about some arrow weight selections, and I know you talk about this a lot. But Cedric, I know you had something you wanted to talk about and ask in regards to arrows.
Yeah, I mean, so I've obviously I'm a huge bone collector fan. Like first deer I ever shot was with, I just got to get it out there, Hoyt Power Max Bone Collector Edition. Like had to get that out there. Yeah, so I mean, I've watched like tons of your guys' videos and all that stuff, and obviously yours, trying to dive in and just learn as much as I can. And so obviously I know the thing that you talk about more than anything is accuracy. Is, it doesn't matter if you've got a fast arrow setup, if you've got a heavy arrow setup, if you can't hit where you're hitting, it doesn't matter. But so say everything's equal, say, your accuracy is where it's at. Are you a guy that's going to lean more towards a heavier setup, or you look more towards like a faster setup so you don't have as much of maybe like a pin gap?
It's first we almost need to determine a benchmark, because it seems like this has been a hot topic for a year and a half or 2 years here lately. But one person would consider a heavy arrow maybe a light arrow to another one. So the benchmark wise, I don't consider, like to me, a light arrow is something like 440 grains or less.
Mhm.
That's considered a light arrow to me. A heavy arrow is something over 550. Something 600, 650. That's like, whoa, man, you're shooting a really heavy arrow. So I don't think it's not to where I try to achieve a certain weight. I guess if you had, ballpark wise, I'm trying to think 500 grainish, so to speak. But I don't think I can shoot the difference. If my arrow ends up weighing 525, I go more towards trying to line up the speed of the arrow, meaning like I like that 255 to about a 280, 285 range. Meaning like if I set my setup and it's 515 grains and it's shooting 300 feet per second, I may even take and tweak that by putting a little more mass weight in the front, increasing the FOC or the overall weight, meaning I'm not gaining anything shooting 295. I can't shoot that pin gap difference. So I know that I can put a little more weight in there, build build a better penetrating and a more forgiving arrow, and then I can lose some speed down to 280, and I won't see a difference in my pin gap until I'm beyond 50 yards. And I don't know about you guys. I mean, out west, it's more important to shoot, long distances. But for us whitetail hunters and such, I mean, we're really 40 yards and in. I never set my corn piles over 40 yards. I'm sure y'all don't either.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with that said, I'm going to lean more towards the forgiving and the penetration and accuracy because, if you're talking tighter pin cap, you're talking the difference between 270 and 275. You got to go nearly like 310, 315 grains to see a difference at all under 40 yards.
Yeah.
I'm always going to lean more towards the heavier, more forgiving, shoot better in the wind, FOC, make up for the flaws in my form that I may have, when you have buck fever and such. So that's what I kind of lean towards.
Yeah, makes sense.
Makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. Now, how do the Sirius products play into that? I know they're fully customizable and you've been using them for a long time. Is that all custom built, the arrow itself, or is there a kit you can get so the average consumer can play with their front of the center, their inserts? Obviously there's the ethics accessories. Now, is that something available straight through them? And what are your thoughts on that product?
That's one of the reasons that I was attracted to it, because I keep using the word in the description of Sirius products as like a boutique, meaning like, there's a lot of good arrow manufacturers. And finally, in the last 5 years, they've started to build or offer good components. We was having to go to a machinist, 10, 15 years ago and build heavy inserts and having them, stacked together so that we could have a higher FOC. And then finally the manufacturers, jumped on board thinking like, we need to be able to manipulate the front of that arrow, because way back in the day, I'm going to go probably older than most of you guys are. The only way to do that is you had one insert and that was it, aluminum arrows. And then if you wanted heavier, then you had to get a bigger broadhead, 150, 200 grain broadhead. And, there wasn't that many choices, you couldn't choose between the two. And we all know that all the engineering and most innovation in the number one selling broadhead is 100 grain broadhead. So it only made sense to be able to manipulate the insert to where you can change the FOC. Plus, think about that. That is, the insert is what holds the whole everything together. It's where you put your broadhead in and it connects the broadhead to the arrow. And then you're going to rely on everything, all your hopes and dreams, all the money you spent all year long on the trips that you're going to. You're going to rely on a 15-cent, 12 grain, 20 grain insert, between, your dreams becoming reality. So I was so proud that there are some, companies like Ethics is excellent, but, there's other companies that offer those kind of products too, Day 6 and Iron Wheel, and even the manufacturers are building a little better components and giving you options on how to build it. But back to Sirius, that's the good thing about it, is they start with a good solid high molecular carbon arrow. It's the straightest and it has the tightest tolerances, and then they can do everything for you so that the guy doesn't have to go to the archery shop. I mean, I was one of those guys that, like, when I had the archery shop, I'd get like 10 dozen arrows and I'd go through every one of them and I'd cull the top 12 arrows. Not that I can shoot the difference in it, but man, it was a hurdle in my head. I had to do that. I mean, I probably can't shoot the difference between a 6,000th versus a 1,000th straightness, but in your head, you think, if it's going to be a problem, it's going to be me, not my arrows.
Yeah. Exactly.
So they start with tight tolerances and good quality control. And then the way they've designed their website, you can walk through there and you can pick out, any different type of length, vein, how you want it fletched. It's just nice to know. And you can play with that and it'll tell you your FOCs by playing with their website there. So you can do a lot of tinkering before you even press, purchase. So that was pretty nice. But yes, to answer your question also, you can get 3 arrow, I guess you call trial kits to see what you like about it, and then you can go ahead and purchase the dozen after the fact. But yeah, it's just a good way of shopping, especially in this day and age when everything's digital and it's hard to build a certain arrow. It's a cool way of doing it, and their quality control is basically second to none. So I was real happy with the way they're doing things and the components they use. And it's not like Sirius wants to conquer the world.
Yeah.
They basically they just want to serve their niche. And for the high-end guy that wants a good product.
Yeah, now they're
really.
offering the lifetime warranty on the hunting arrows as well too. If you break one, no
Really?
questions asked, they can send you another one. Yep.
Yeah, I saw that.
I forgot all about that.
I broke one the other day.
Yeah, it's cool.
I forgot all about that. That's crazy, actually.
When you talk about FOC, so I've heard a couple different things. Like, you have the guy that he always tries to strive for a certain amount of FOC, like a certain percentage. And then you have the guy that just what tunes well. Like, so which one do you try to lean more towards? Are you a guy that's like, I'm trying to get to 12 or 13% FOC, or is it just what's flying good?
Well, flying good is certainly gonna, that's gonna be the best and the most accuracy. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to at least get 15, somewhere between 15 and 19. And most all the time, no matter where you land there, they're all gonna fly pretty good, to the point where you can't shoot the difference. But 15 to 19 seems to be the most forgiveness with the flaws in your form, accuracy and wind. And then of course, it's been proven that higher FOC helps your mass weight, but it also helps in penetration as well. So that's what I try to achieve. I mean, that doesn't mean that like the guy that ends up with a 13.8, like, man, you shouldn't even go to the woods. You're not going to kill a deer. I'm never going to be that guy that says,
Yeah.
but me personally, I try to achieve that 15 to 19.
Nice.
Makes sense.
Great. So when you're setting up different setups, so obviously you set up your bows for your team and for the show and everything, are you making changes? So say you're hunting, does right now in Georgia, and then, 2 weeks ago you're out hunting elk. So are you changing your setup based on that, or are you just setting up for the season? This is what works. This is what shoots great for your bow. Or are you making changes to your arrow weight, your front of center, whatever in your setup before you go on those different kinds of hunts? We get those questions a lot.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I'm not saying that I wouldn't do some changing on certain things, maybe on certain hunts, but for the most part, I'm just going to set up for anything in North America. You know what I mean? Something that I'm going to be able to shoot a moose with, I'm going to shoot an elk with, or, that's my mindset. Of course, I'm not going to be doing those kind of things like I used to, with what I had going on. But nonetheless, I'm wanting anything for the North American continent. So that's what I go for. And it's more important to me to spend more time behind the bow, learning the cast of that arrow, learning the pin gap that you have, and becoming more familiar with the bow. We can dissect like arrow weights and this and trying to buy more accuracy, whereas we all should spend more time behind the bow is going to help us being more forgiving, more accurate than anything that we can do buying or tinkering in the shop and stuff. I mean, it's all fun and it all has value, but at the end of the day, that's what we got to do is, spend more time behind the bow. So I like to set up with one thing and try to just pound the targets and just learn that bow and build confidence.
Agree completely.
Yeah, 100%.
Plus it gets expensive changing things.
Yeah, it does. Yes, it does.
20 something dollars an arrow.
Yeah.
Throw the broadhead on top of that and one and done.
How long did it take for you to convince Michael to go to a back bar?
Not very long. I mean, not at all. I'm just because I'm a little anal on arrow setups and bow setups. Him and Nick both, if y'all look, I mean, and anybody listening, now you're going to look after I tell you this, but they've done nothing to manipulate that to where it's the best. They've got it, how most you're supposed to dog leg it off just a little bit, about 4 inches, and dog leg it down. They've got it run all the way out like a kickstand on a Harley, man. I'm like, gosh, man, come on, guys.
That's awesome.
That's something else.
That's funny.
Yeah, go back and look at some of the pictures like Nick's kills this year and stuff like that, man. It's like it's bent out sideways. I mean, it's out like
I'll take a picture and text him and say, "What the heck's up with this, buddy?"
It's another camera angle. Just mount a GoPro on that. You can see around the tree you're hiding behind.
Put a Tacticam on it.
There you go.
Absolutely. So circling back to the earlier days when you had your archery shop, is that something that, like, what's in that building now? Is there something there? Do you own the building, or is it what's in that area now?
I sold my store to another store that was in the next town below us. He was a very large gun store, very large outdoor store, really nice store, and he didn't do archery, and then he wanted to take it to the next level. But I had already had the, like Matthews and Hoyt and all the major brands, and thank goodness, all these brands give you protected areas, so he couldn't get any brands. So he had asked me if I was interested in selling, and honestly, that was about the same time I was doing a lot with Realtree, and I'm like, you know what, most little archery shops, they usually just fade off into the sunset. And I researched how to sell my business, and I gave him a price. We agreed on a price, and then, in doing so, he didn't want the real estate, he just wanted the store. And there was a transition period. I had to go to work for him for 2 years to transition the clientele. I mean, I could work there longer than that if I wanted to, and did actually. I worked almost 3 years there, but during that time we were starting Bone Collectors, and I was doing more and more stuff for Realtree. So, and it was all excusable. He got it. The more I was doing stuff for Bone Collector and Realtree and stuff like that, it was just bringing more notoriety to the store. And, I was handling my duties as far as a manager of the store and helping. So it worked out really good. But I sold the real estate shortly after I sold the store separately, and it was a beauty salon right after that. It was a standalone store. And then it turned into a convenience store. Honestly, it turned into, you know, in these convenience stores where they got the one-armed bandits, you know, the
yeah.
slot machines and all them, it really turned into an illegal gambling establishment, and it was a convenience store that didn't sell gas. And, it's just been boarded up basically for the last 6 months now, but it's still sitting there.
That's got to be a little heartbreaking, huh?
Oh yeah, I tell stories like people will come visit, or we'll have clients come in town and they'll stay here, and I'll run them by there and say, yeah, this is where the archery shop was. And it's kind of cool because we had a target out beside the building. The building was just a, you know, like a square building, and off to the side, we shot down the side of the building. But in order to get 60 yards, you had to go all the way to the road. So we would stand on the white line of the road, which is Highway 54. We would shoot 60 yards, you know, so people going up and down the road, and we're launching arrows right down beside the building.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Great nostalgia there.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
With all the hunts and obviously all the like accomplishments and stuff you've had like in the tournament side of things, what do you think is like probably one of your most like things that you're the most proud of, you think?
Well, for me, that stands out, you know, from a willpower standpoint. I wished I had, you know, as far as losing weight, I wished I had that kind of willpower, but that's always been a struggle. But overcoming target panic. Like I had won the world championships in 91, you know, after that in 92, you know, like all eyes was on me. I was a real young guy, and like, you know, the focus was on me. And I really don't feel as proud about winning the world championship because, you know, I punched the trigger and at the time, and my timing was right and all, but I didn't know a lot about archery at 91. All I knew was just I was a good shot and I judged yardage good. I happened to win it. Well, then I learned that, hey, I'm punching. I developed target panic. I was flinching, and man, I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn in 92. So just about crying coming off the mountain in Erie, Pennsylvania, shooting the IBO Triple Crown up there. And I was like, man, I'm sucking. You know, I dedicated myself in the fall of 92 and early part of 93 to overcoming target panic, start shooting a back tension release. And I mean, it was training regiment every single day. And I come out, you know, I'm bragging because I'm proud of myself, but I came out guns a-blazing in 93, and, you know, and have never looked back. As far as I think once you have target panic, you always have it. You just really learn to suppress it. So I'm really proud of that. But I mean, there's so many things. I mean, dude, I'm so blessed to have the life that I've got, you know, because I was a dumb fat boy from Georgia, and, you know, I worked for Mercedes-Benz in Atlanta, and then to live out my dreams and get to hunt all over. I mean, really my only wish was like, man, one day I'd like to go to the Midwest, and, you know, I'd love to kill about 150-inch buck in the Midwest. That'd be great. And that was about my only, you know, dreams hunting wise. And then to get to do everything I've got to do, I am so blessed.
Listening to you talk about all the, you know, the experiences you've had and the years and all the different, you know, stages of your career, if you will. I mean, it's pretty amazing to me because that's one of the things I talk to people about is the memories made while you're hunting, you know, whether it be with the people you're with or the, you know, quote unquote camp, you know, all those different memories from when you're a young child and everything else. Cause I'm sure just like you and like everybody else on the podcast with us and then listening, like I can remember what the tree looked like I was sitting against, you know, the time I shot my first deer. And you know, I grew up in Kansas. You know, I have a lever action 30-30. I still got it in safe here that you can't shoot it here in Ohio, but you know, all those different things where some days I have a hard time remembering somebody's name, you know, after a 5-minute conversation, let alone what I did last week. But then, you know, listening to you talk, you know, about these dates and this year, and you've been able to remember all that stuff. I mean, I think that's part of the amazing part of the outdoors and the hunting in general is how those memories and those experiences get etched into your brain, you know, into your mind, and they don't ever leave you, you know. So whether you get old or things change or your health or whatever the case may be, but all those memories, you get to relive them and you get to tell the stories and everything else. So I guess one of the things that I wanted to hear from you, because I was watching some little documentaries and stuff about you, but maybe from your childhood or younger years or whenever you want to say, but is there one like hunting experience that really like clicked in your mind that was like, this is it. Like, this is what I've been searching for, this hunt, this experience, these memories. Like, is there one thing that you just, if you had to sit back and recall, like, okay, I want to tell somebody something that's going to spark something in them, what would you talk about?
It's hard to nail it down to one, man, because every one of them, you know, as you was explaining all that, you're sitting here saying you can remember the tree that you were sitting beside and all those kind of things. Well, it's funny how when you're passionate about something, you're a sponge. You just can't. I mean, you're so focused. I mean, I have ADD. I mean, I can't even read a magazine article without just like drifting off into space. I'm horrible about that. But when you're interested in something, like back in the day, long before the internet, I mean, I couldn't get enough of reading everything about archery, watching the DVD. I mean, well, it was VHS tapes back then, but I mean, I just could not. I was such a spun about archery and hunting and every little hunt and every little thing, there's something that you take away from it. But, you know, as far as a memorable hunt is like the very first year that we started Bone Collector, I mean, we didn't have two nickels to rub together. We didn't know where this was going to go. We figured like, we'd all worked with Realtree, and, I drew an Iowa tag long before we started. I knew I was going to Iowa because I had so many preference points, and I was going to do like what I had said earlier, like I figured going to Iowa. I was friends with Lee and Tiffany. We hadn't started Bone Collector. I said, I'm going to keep putting in. They invited me up there to hunt with them. I said, I'm going to go up there and try to kill me a good white-tailed deer in Iowa. So then we started Bone Collector, and I'd went up there for a week early on, like the first week of October, had a few encounters, didn't kill anything. And then, I'm not going to let that tag go to waste. I'm going back, man. So in November, I said, I'm going back. So I went back, and Lee and Tiffany, they wasn't able to, they had people coming in or something like that, but I was in that whole unit. Well, I talked to the guys at Whitetail Properties. They had a piece of property that they ain't even stepped foot on. They said, absolutely, go in there. It's yours. It's just a clean slate. Do whatever you got to do. Nick drove down. He had a Toyota 4Runner, and he said, yeah, I got my trailer. I'll bring some stands and stuff. And it's a little rabbit trailer. It's only like 5 foot wide. I mean, honestly, it was embarrassing. I'm like, we couldn't go over 55 mile an hour. And we're in his Toyota 4Runner that was, it was ancient. And we go on this piece of property. We set up some trail cameras long before any cell phone cameras. We set up some trail cameras, and we set stands and scouted it out. And, I ended up killing a, 160-inch buck, and actually we snort wheezed it in. I mean, like I always use the frame pride factor. You're hunting over corn and you're in the South Texas or something like that, you're proud of any deer you kill. But, like if we're going to sit down, like the most pride factor, the way to kill a whitetail would be like pre-rut or the very first of the rut. You crack the horns right after daylight. You're in the timber, and, he comes walking in. If you're painting the perfect picture of a whitetail hunt, that's the way it all went down. And then me and Nick, knowing that, hey, we're starting this journey with Bone Collector, we may be broke as a turd in 2 years, and we don't know where this is going to go. Me and him's crying like two schoolgirls after I'd shot that, man. He went down, he's filming me, and I'm like, oh. So
that's awesome.
that was extremely memorable. And then for we got to celebrate with Lee and Tiffany there, and then we took it by there, and then we did it all on our own. It wasn't an outfitter. It wasn't like go sit in this stand. Old blocky heads coming by here in in 2 hours. It wasn't none of that. It was all did it ourselves, DIY, and then being the first part of Bone Collector, and this fat George redneck done killed a 150 plus in Iowa.
Nice.
So all of those things, just like dreams do come true, man. So
yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, Travis, I want to jump in here a little bit and just ask you a question, but I want to first start by saying absolute utmost respect for you and all the guys that you work with. And I grew up as a kid, man, we all did. I'm sure all of us can sit there and say this, but we all grew up watching Realtree road trips and all the things you guys put out and ate it up like Sunday night, something came on. I remember being in my mom and dad's farmhouse, like just waiting for that TV show to come on. So I want to start by thanking you guys for all you've done for just archery and bow hunting in general, because I've listened to, you talk about your most memorable hunt, and you're talking about this organic, it's real, and we're just a group of real guys here. And so like Troy and I have been hunting a lot together, and I can't tell you, like before we started this, Travis, Troy and I didn't know each other that well. Paul, Cedric, Noel, but there's something about a group of guys when you just gel together and you're out there, you're living the dream because you're doing it right and you're having a blast, and nothing goes perfect. You always have mishaps and adventure. I call them adventures while you're hunting. You got to figure yourself out, but I just have utmost respect for you and what you guys do there. That being said, I have a question that something that bothers me a lot, and that is bow grip. And one thing I want to ask you about, and I've been back and forth with this, open hand, pinch your fingers, one hand closed, point with the pinky, and I see a lot of guys shooting and they're gripping it full, they have a full grip in their bow grip. In your opinion, and I know it's going to be situational for the person, but what do you think is the most stable and best performing bow grip to have?
Well, a low wrist, it's going to be hard to show on here, but a low wrist, and then you want equal tension from the top to the bottom. And then what I always try to tell people is you don't want any tension in your hand. People say, well, I shoot with my hand open. Well, you can have your hand open, but yet you can have tension in your fingers.
Yes.
If there's tension in your hand at all, that can equate to torquing the bow. So I tell people, like, you want it to be bone to bone. You want to imagine that the bow is pushing up your arm, that's pushing up the bone of your arm, and you want to balance it right here. Imagine you didn't have a hand, and then all it was a flat nub right there. You're going to do your best to balance that bow there. So let it push right in the center of your palm, top to bottom, low wrist, because, if you was doing a push-up, you wouldn't do them on your fingertips more than likely, because that puts such a tension on the tendons and ligaments in your wrist that they're not going to be the same. So if you've got any movement or any inconsistency with your wrist, it's going to cause torque, and it's going to cause, just not duplication. So So, it's okay to kind of grab the bow when you draw on the bow, but once you're setting the shot up, you want to relax your fingers. I should be able to flip your fingers and they just wobble in the front of the bow. And imagine that the bow is pushing up the bone of your arm and just balancing. Equal tension from the top to the bottom, equal pressure, I should say, from the top to the bottom, and just push straight away. Imagine that you're just pushing straight away. Because if there's any tension in your hand and you're inconsistent in that, you'll have left and right. You'll be chasing it all over.
Yeah, that's one thing I've been really doing recently is I've been working on my grip, because that's, two things that get me is my grip, make sure that I got that muscle memory down. And the second thing, and I don't know if you guys do this, but I do it a lot. I have a habit, and it's a bad habit. And here's my bad habit. I want to move that pin at the shot. I want to move the pin to see where the arrow is going. I don't want to watch an arrow through the pin. I tend to want to move it. And for some reason, like the pin's in my road, and right the last second before I release, I'll want to move left or something. And so I've been trying to train my eye to watch the arrow through the pin to the target. And that seems to help me quite a bit.
Yeah, I would tell someone to stare where you want the arrow to hit. Yeah, and let that be the last thing. Like once you get the pin close, you're never going to make a pin stop.
Yeah.
Everybody tries to make that pin stop, and then they start staring at the pin. And then the more you stare at the pin, it's like, there's no way I can shoot this shot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So just stare where you want it to hit. Get the pin close and let it just be fuzzy in the foreground, and then stare at that hole. I mean, just say, I'm going to hit that hole right there, and just stare, and then let the shot happen. It's tough. I mean, it's tough to work out a regiment, but that's what you kind of got to do. And then you got to relax, because if there's tension here, or if you touch the trigger, or you have anticipation and this front hand moves before your trigger, you'll always have, flinching, and you'll always have problems.
Hey, Travis, something to follow up on that with the hand grip. Does that have anything to do with your type of rest? Like if you're using a whisker biscuit?
Oh my God. He's going to go after me. I knew it was coming.
I knew it. I had to.
Yeah. No, honestly, I don't have a problem with a whisker biscuit at all.
Poof.
Yeah. I mean, there's cons about everything. About the only thing I would say about a whisker biscuit is if it gets moisture in it and you're hunting in cold temperatures, it will freeze up, so that is going to change some inconsistencies. And then, people never know when to replace it. Meaning, like, they say, I think I can get a few more shots out of it, but it wears so slow that things change a little bit on it. But, like you got a good fresh whisker biscuit for the beginning archer, or for someone that wants that full capture. I mean, I'm not going to say no to a whisker biscuit. I mean, if that's all there was, I'd gladly shoot one.
What is your rest of choice? What do you shoot?
Well, drop away, I like a cable driven drop away. And what I'm shooting this year is the Prophecy, the AAE Prophecy is what I'm shooting this year. Really tight tolerances. We shot the Virtus, the HHA Virtus. Was really a fan of it, but they quit making it. They don't make it no more. Everything started, and probably the number one rest is that QAD, but I don't know if you guys have noticed. I like the way it works. However, the tolerances have gotten really bad on them. I mean, even the integrated ones, there's so much movement there, and you can't have that. You just can't have that with a rest. I mean, your rest has to have tight tolerances, and it has to work properly. And why I choose, I'm not against the limb-driven ones, but from a hunting standpoint, I like the cable-driven because the rope draw cord is shorter, so therefore the percentage of stretch is less, as well as it's less likely to snag on stuff. When you got that cord going all the way down to the lower limb, if you'll notice the percentage of stretch is so much, you're always having to retighten that, because your rest will always, from a tournament standpoint, I don't have a problem with it at all. But, for the average guy that's not really savvy and working on his stuff, I think the cable driven is going to be a little more consistent and, perform for him a little more flawless and less likely to have problems as a hunting drop away.
Yeah, I agree 100%, and typically sell a ton of those. I have noticed, though, even changing out the timing cord on that limb-driven rest, the stretch is just, I seem like every 20 arrows or so, I'm tightening that cable up. And I just wish there was something that they make that would hinder that. It would just make the product so much better. But yeah, I mean, I shot QAD forever. I was with Mark and them for a long time, and it seems that the integrate is you're constantly tightening everything.
Yeah.
It's you take 50 shots and then you're tightening everything back up. But then the new R2 that came out, it's more of that older style slides. There's not as much adjustment on it from a micro standpoint, but it seems to be a little bit tighter. So hopefully they can work that out, because they're definitely a leader in it. So, and they make some good products. But
Yeah.
I heard good things about the Prophecy. I know they changed that up for this year, the way it drops, and something like not moleskin, but the dropper, the launcher is like a silent substance. Was it like
It's well, they call it hog hide or pig hide.
hog hide? Yep.
But it is quiet. However, it's too, in my opinion, Nick and I had, he said to try it, and I tried it, but it's really too thick, so it wears pretty good. So I like a lower mat micro fleece and then lace it on there. I mean, don't get me wrong, what they're providing is quiet. However, if you don't lace it, you go through hot, cold to wet to snow, that self-adhesive is going to turn loose. You're going to have to lace it, or otherwise you're going to always be replacing it. And every time we replace it, it's changing your center shot a little bit. So, I know I'm splitting hairs by this, but your arrow rest is splitting hairs. So you got to have it precise.
Exactly. And that kind of leads me into a nice direction here, segue. So lately we've been doing a lot of traveling. We just came from Newfoundland on a moose hunt, and we go out west a lot and just going back and forth, this year between Ohio and Virginia and Missouri and all that. With your arrows, when you're traveling, why is it, and I know it's temperature balance, right? But your bow sits in the tarmac in 100 something degrees, it goes up in the airplane, it's negative 60 or whatever it is up there. You get to camp, you go to shoot, and the first arrow, all the fletchings go off of it. And it seems to be no matter what glue you use, whether you're using, Fletch Tite or you're using a primer pen and other glue, it just seems like there's nothing to stop that. Is there something that we can do or product there? It just seems like every time I travel somewhere, I'm refletching when I get there.
Honestly, I've never had that problem. I promise you. Yeah, now I've had my bow not. I thought you was going to say that you've had like it wasn't, like flying or changing, the air pressure in the plane and, the elevation, it doesn't hit the same. And, with that, I would say that it's probably, string stretch and just the way it flexes basically. And, you just got to spend a little bit of time or,
I see that as well.
Your peep sight may have moved or got slid up or, I don't know. Them TSA agents, it seems like they know how to work on a bow and they go in there and screw with things, I guess. But but no, I've never had that problem. I mean, I by no means am the excellent fletcher. I mean, I have fletched a lot of arrows in my day, but I don't know what I do any different that I could just sit here and tell like, oh, if you do this, it's going to work. But something that I do also do, I don't know if y'all do, once you fletch it like the manufacturer recommends, no matter what vein it is, I'll take either like the bonding, it's the platinum glue, or the fletch, it's called Flex Bond, and then I dab, it's a rubberized, so it never gets really brittle and hard like a super glue, and I put on the front and the back of my veins because those are the leading edges that fill up. We make sure we call it dotting the front and the back of the veins, and that seems to stop any pillage or anything like that. But I don't know if that's the key to success or whatever, but I haven't experienced that. Now, we have went through down here in the South because it's so humid. We have had some batches of arrows, like we'll fletch them and then like you did them just like you always did before.
Yep.
They just fall off. And man, I don't have a shop per se, but if I owned a shop, man, you're talking about getting into your profit margins big time if your veins are falling off. And I mean, you have to fix it because it's not the customer's fault, even though it's the glue's fault or what have you. You can get into a pocketbook pretty quick. Now, something we have started doing that seems to work is when we're done with our super glue or the glue that we're using, we squeeze all the air out of it, put the top on real tight, and we put it in the refrigerator.
Oh, okay.
So we keep it in the refrigerator. So therefore the consistency doesn't change. But then again, we're not fletching arrows constantly here to where we're going through lots of quantity. So we got glue that sits around for a while. So we put it in there and then you take it out an hour, you let it sit room temperature for an hour before you fletch again with it. But that seems to have gotten us, it seems like the glue stays fresher, so to speak.
That's a good idea.
Remember that because I've ruined some tubes of glue, but just leaving them on the shelf or wherever.
Yeah, you go to fletch and it's hard as a brick, and it's like, well, we're headed to Home Depot. Let's go get some glue.
Yep.
What do you recommend for glue?
It just depends on which brand. I've been shooting Flex Fletch veins as of late, and I just use their Zing glue and then their primer pen, which in my opinion, they're never going to say this, not just Flex Fletch, but anybody that has a primer pen, I think it's acetone. I think I honestly believe it's
Yeah,
acetone.
It is.
exactly.
But they're never going to say that because they want you to buy their primer pen, but I think it's acetone. But I use the primer pen, and sure is nice fletching those AEE hybrids too, boy. Those seem to be the easiest
yeah.
to fletch.
Mhm.
It's basically a lick and stick, and it works.
I just switched to the QTIs the same way. So easy to put them on.
Yeah, those are good veins as well.
But that Zing Cling is good stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna try that. I've been using the Tax primer pen and glue, and it's been pretty consistent. The only struggles I've had, and I've run into the situation that you were talking about because I own a shop here, is with Easton with their new 4 and 5 millimeter FMJ series. It's got this slippery coating on the outside to make it come out of the. It's almost like a gold tip airstrike. It's got that smooth coating, and you always have to like use sandpaper on the where you're gonna fletch, or a little bit of emery cloth or something to rough it up. Otherwise, I mean, you shoot and it's like a fiesta out there.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
just colors
yeah.
flying everywhere.
Paul, that's exactly why I tried this year. I was going to ask Travis too. So I went to those boning shrink fletches, those wraps, on the end. I got those FMJs Paul sent me, and I'm like, well, I don't really want to fletch these arrows. So I bought those. They're like a USA, patriotic themed vein, but they're all boning shrink fletches. And I put them on. And the only thing I found out that's bad about those is what Paul said earlier. You take them on a trip, you're going up in a plane, and through those temperature differences, sometimes that plastic gets brittle, and it'll start to crack on those shrink wraps. So, but other than that, I like them. They stay on pretty well.
Yeah, the shrink wraps. I noticed a lot of people. We've tried them back when NAP was making them. Of course, I think NAP had a bad run of those things. But when you take like I've noticed a lot of people when you dip it into the water, if you go too fast, water gets behind it. You got to go real slow so that it folds up slowly. But I've seen where a lot of people just dip it in there real quick, and then water goes over the top and it mashes around, and then you get water underneath there.
Right. Yeah. What I figured out this season, it finally worked real well, is you're right. I dip it down in and put the back end in first, right? And then slowly push the front down. And then you can see the air bubbles. You can see these bubbles come out the top as it's pushing that water and air out. So that way, it kind of from knock end up, it shrinks on so you don't get that trapment.
Exactly.
Pretty well.
That's good. And you talked about tack veins. I like tack veins, like once they're on, and I love the rigidity of them, in flight. However, the cons of them is you guys hunting in cold weather. Have y'all noticed that they didn't do real well for me in cold weather? I mean, they got extremely brittle because I guess they're so rigid. But also, like if you get them bent up, how you'll wad a bunch of arrows together, it stays. So if it gets bent over, it stays. Whereas like I've noticed like with the Flex Fletch and stuff, you can wad them up, set them for 24 hours in 75-degree temperature, and they go right back. It looks like you just fletched them. I love the tack vein from a flying standpoint when they're right, but I noticed the cold weather as well as I guess you call it a bad memory. So
they need more clamp time too, because the base is stiff on them because they're so stiff. You sit there and it's like with the AAE or the Flex Fletch, they're softer at that base, so you can clamp it right on. It folds out, it sticks well, and you can get through an arrow pretty quickly. Where tack, you go walk away and go do something and come back and do the next one. But and just like anything else out there, there's pros and cons to everything. It's just what you like and what your preference is, and go from there.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Question for Travis. It's my preference of an arrow personally is that the Easton FMJs. I've shot them for quite a long time now. I like how they seem to drive through and penetrate really well, and they seem to be fairly stiff having that aluminum shell. What's your take on the FMJs, Travis? Like, is it something that you like for penetration, or do you have a preference on an arrow for hunting?
I like the FMJ from the standpoint. I love aluminum. I absolutely love aluminum from a standpoint of I think if I still shot tournaments, I'd probably shoot aluminum arrows. Aluminum arrow, take creases and bumps, and they're not going to last as long as a carbon arrow. However, I think aluminum is superior as far as copying, being straight and being a consistent spine, more so than, even the highest molecular carbon. And the reason why is because, carbon is made up of fiber and resins, whereas aluminum is drawn. So with aluminum, it seems to be more consistent in spine through temperatures and stuff like that, so that it seems to be more accurate in my opinion. I'm a huge fan of the old ACCs, the aluminum on the inside and the carbon on the outside. Well, a FMJ is just the opposite. It's a aluminum on the inside and that carbon on the outside. So I love that standpoint. However, and I shouldn't say it why FMJ is not in my wheelhouse, it's just because if you're trying to build an arrow with higher FOC, you end up getting an extremely heavy arrow. So it's basic terms, it's a higher grains per inch. It's on up there in the high 10s. in 11 grains per inch. So therefore, which is not a bad thing, it just makes your overall weight heavier. If you're going to put higher FOC to get up around, 17, 18, 19%, your arrow is going to weigh a lot more than what you was trying, the end result is going to be. So that would be my only negative towards FMJ, is just it's not in the wheelhouse, so to speak, of the grains per inch that I like. I like that somewhere in the 9s.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, but that's not anything against the FMJ as far as, being able to penetrate. We know that from reading Dr. Ashby's report, as long as there's a 5% reduction in the size of the broadhead ferrule down to the shaft, that's all you have to have. So, the ideology of, you got to have these really micro 0.166 arrows for better penetration. It's really not an advantage, because as long as, most broadheads are built on a 21/64 frame. And then as long as it steps down 5% smaller than that, which takes down the drag, you'll get good penetration on that. Not necessarily on a target, because but a target is not an animal, so to speak.
Right.
Measuring penetration on a target, it's built all off of friction. So rubber's going to wrap around whatever, and naturally the smallest diameter shaft is going to penetrate better on a foam target, but not so much on an animal, just as long as you're punching that hole. So, penetration wise, it's going to be good. And, it has that aluminum, which tells me that it has the great consistency. So, I'm not anti-FMJ. I'm just telling you pros and cons of it. By all means, if you've got confidence in it and it's what you like, go ahead and shoot it.
Yeah, it makes sense though, because you're talking about that mass weight, and I know what you're saying. It's distributed along the arrow length, the whole length, not just on the front of center. It makes sense.
Correct. Yeah.
Sure.
And if you're trying to achieve a certain weight so that you can achieve a certain speed, like if you're trying to hit around that 500, 525, it's going to be real hard pressed to do that and still get the FOC that you want. So that's all. It's just another part of the equation. It's not nothing negative. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah. Like this season I'm running right now for whitetail, focusing on that only this fall. I'm running a FMJ around 550. I usually use 100 grain broadhead in the end, and then I'm running like a 75 grain half out steel outsert on it, and they seem to be shooting really nice. I like what they do. I like the penetration on them, but it's amazing the variety of different weights and accessories, just every arrow building in general. I'm sure all of us shoot a slightly different variety, but that prime Revix is pushing that thing. It's 550 and it's pushing it at 285 feet per second. So I'm real happy with that right now.
Yeah, that's really nice. With that speed, with that weight arrow, you got, like we talked about earlier, you got a lot of options. You could go with something, a lighter grain per inch, and then you could go heavier in the front and, still keep those speeds up there. That it's nice to know you got those options. Tells you that the efficiency of the bow that you're running, again, it gives you options. So many guys get hung up on, hey, my bow is shooting 350 feet per second, which IBO legal is not realistic in the real world. So many guys, for you that work in a shop or run a shop, the guy reads all these articles and he comes in there thinking, I'm fixing to get my bow set up, and it's Hoyt that's shooting 350 feet per second. Well, by the time you shorten his draw length to 28 inches and put all the stuff in the string and get him a good arrow, and he pops it through there at 273, and he's going to write you a check for $2,700, he's crying, because he's just like, I just got took. So we need to change that standard of the IBO legal, in my opinion, down to something that's more reasonable. And it sure does make us as consumers happier, as well as those who run shops. It makes it easier for us to sell, rather than having to answer all these questions and let that guy cry on your shoulder as he's walking out the door.
Yeah. And let me tell you, there are those people that come in and they're just like, I want the fastest bow. That's it.
Yeah.
I don't want to shoot it. I don't want anything else. What's the fastest bow? And you're like, hey, there's so much that goes into that. There's so many varieties. And I just wish people out there, and I preach it all the time, is shoot everything. Like, you shoot Hoyt, we shoot Prime, you shoot Matthews. Like, it might be a, blackout bow from Cabela's and you shoot it like a pro. Great. Use that one. It's what fits you. It's not like you're going to buy a Honda Civic here. You're going to get a custom fitted suit, and Troy's skinny and muscular, I'm rounder than that, so it's different, right? So, and then that's I spend a lot of time explaining that to people, and I wish more people would just stop being like, Cameron Haynes shoots this, so I want to go get it. Well, you're not Cameron Haynes, so let's work through what works for you. So, and I see people waste a lot of money. Good for me, but they come in and they're trading in their 2023 X for this because they shot it and they liked it better. And that you should have did that work on the front. So that's why they have all these shows and these places like us that you can come and shoot and test drive that car, so to say.
Accuracy always wins. And then, if you do have a bow that you're buying that is 350 feet per second, and that's what it's IBO legal at, well, with that said, that like we talked about, that gives you options. I mean, that makes it to where you can, play with different arrows and still have great seed. You use that efficiency to your advantage rather than just trying to, try to get the fastest in the quarter mile that you possibly can.
Yeah.
So where do you think bows go from here? Like, obviously there's been a drastic, change from whenever you first got into archery to, 2023, but it feels like, and I say this, and then every year they come out with something, you're like, oh my gosh, like that's amazing, but it feels like bows are starting to get maxed out as far as when you start talking speed and, things like that. And it's starting to become more just user friendly or cosmetically, it just looks better. You know what I mean? So like, where do you think bows go from here?
I don't know. I scratch my head every year. I say, well, just like you're saying, like what's next? I mean, they've done about all they can do. And efficiency wise, and speed wise, they really have. But I guess it's just a different way of harnessing it. Something that, that they really haven't changed that much over the last 5 or 6 years. But if you'll notice what they've done is, taking that energy, keeping the energy, and they're making it quieter and it's smoother. I mean, all the bow manufacturers, I'm a huge fan of that prime. I love the double track. I mean, the bow's a little on the heavy side just because basically you got 2 cams up top and 2 cams at the bottom, because the cams are double the weight. But I love the way that I always thought I'm a big fan of the guys at Grace Engineering. They do a fantastic job with all their innovations. But, Matthews, from a standpoint of marketing, is they're geniuses actually, because, the bridge lock system, the way it goes into the riser and stuff, how they're promoting it this year, they built that based off of necessity, because in order to build the bows they're building now, they had to build wider risers, and therefore that made it more mass weight. And then therefore, the OEM or all manufacturers, their sights was offset so far because they had a wider riser. So in order for the sights to work, you was having to have the aperture part go way back over, which made it flimsy. So rather than having all these accessory manufacturers stuff not working right, they put it in the center of the riser so that you're forced to use their system on top of all the accessories can stay the same, as far as the aperture not having to have extended tubes for your apertures to run out there. So they took a negative and turned it into a marketing positive. So, hats off to them for doing so. But like the other day, launched their new target bow. Levi was shooting. I don't know if you guys have seen their new target bow. I could not believe, well, and this is all across the board with all manufacturers, but like just accessory prices, I don't see it all the time because, I'm not in retail like I was before, but, I do pay attention because I love it so much. But they were quoting some of the prices of those carbon bridge lock stabilizers.
Paul and I
like
were just talking about that.
An 8-inch, I think it was $329 for an 8-inch stabilizer.
Yeah.
Wow.
And their 30 is like 500 or something.
Let's not
it's just
talk about the 30.
Yeah, just
Wow.
ridiculous.
I didn't pay $400 for my first bow. For the whole bow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
You're walking out the door with that bow for like $6,000. $5 to
that's
$6,000.
insane.
It's with quality accessories. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just insane.
Absolutely. But hey, I mean, he got it 100% right. It's marketing. I mean, they've done a fantastic job of marketing their product. First they captured them with their technology, then they captured their market base to keep them in house and not have to go to Shrewd or, Dead Center or something like that. They could stay in house and save that money that way. So, kudos to them on that point. Golly, when you got to write that check. Whew.
So I guess to answer your question, where I see archery going is up in price.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No doubt.
That and everything else. Everything else.
Hey, Travis,
Yes.
got a question for you. What do you think about Lee and those guys switching to Matthews from Hoyt?
It was shocking. It was shocking. I mean, it shocked me too. I guess I know a little more than behind the scenes, so I'll plead the fifth on that. But
Gotcha.
but yeah, it was surprising. I like to see they're good guys. Don't get me wrong, they're good guys. They've been down here a couple of times, and I talk to them pretty regular. And what they're doing is phenomenal. I mean, I've told them 1,000 times. I have the utmost respect for you guys, but I honestly would not want to have to do what y'all have to do. The pounding on the doors, the having to hunting here on a farm at my own place, I'm sitting here worried about the wind shifting on an evening hunt, where they're worried about, man, I hope that the landowner right here doesn't get an Amazon Prime delivery and run my deer off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, hope that guy don't whack a golf ball over here while I'm. So They got definitely other issues to worry about, like what we normally have to. But, hats off to them for doing that. They put a lot of time in it and a lot of work. And I feel like they tightrope the fence as far as, that's not negative. I'm just saying they really have to keep their eyes open on like landowners and if they're doing things right and things like that. So it's very entertaining and it's very niche, and they've done a really good job of shining a light on it. And it's getting a lot of young eyeballs following hunting. So I'm a fan of that. But I was surprised that they left. I kind of seen those guys as being pretty loyal to, who brought them to the dance and stuff. That was surprising. So that's all I got to say about that.
There's a couple guys here in Columbus, Ohio. I don't know if you ran into a couple, I can't remember their names. It's called the Creek Kings Outdoors here in Columbus, but they do very similar thing than Seek One. They hunt the suburbs of Columbus, and I'm down there all the time, so I know them quite a bit. But it's the same philosophy. They go door knocking and try to get permission, and it's amazing to watch their content. They're chasing like a 240 some inch deer last year, but then like you said, Travis, you get kind of into that. It can get kind of muddy. You know what I'm saying? It can get kind of muddy pretty quick.
Yeah.
And you're doing it on video.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's evidence.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure around the Columbus area, you guys know Scott and Steve Esker, who have killed so many 200-inch deer in that area, and they've been doing that for a long time. They're not videoing it, and then Adam Hayes as well. I know that he hunts a lot in that Columbus surrounding area. So I don't know what it is about that area, man. There's just so many big monster non-typicals up that way, man. It's just Columbus is known for that.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you get outside, you go like, coming north on 71, you get outside of like the Polaris area and you've got nothing but ag fields forever up that interstate. And you look on right and left, there's deer everywhere all the time. All over the place there.
Yeah, we've hunted a lot up in Logan County, up near DeGraff. Where's the Honda plant? Marysville?
Marysville.
Yeah, just north of Marysville. We've hunted up that way quite a bit. And it's all agriculture. Everything on the eastern side of Ohio is all mountainous and hilly. And like, man, I wouldn't wish that on a mountain goat to hunt over that area. But then then the whole western side is just pure agriculture. So it's, Ohio is definitely very diverse.
So down there in Georgia, you guys are hunting a lot of like big timber bucks, right? Like obviously I know you have your food plots and stuff put in, but you guys have quite a bit of like big timber that you hunt, right?
Well, it's not big hardwoods. It's just pines,
Okay.
Georgia has transitioned over the last 25 years. It's went from, in this area, which is called the Piedmont region, the center section of Georgia, used to have quite a bit of agriculture and fields and stuff. Well, they learned real quickly that we can grow through hybrid pine tree management, that this clay soil grows pine trees like no other. So all these fields and everything that was open and any agriculture that we had in this area is all gone. So our number one crop is pine trees now. We can take a tree and get 3 cuttings off of it in 20 years. I mean, all the way to maturity to where they're big enough to do telephone poles out of. So so everything's pine trees. And then with that, there's just no nutrition with that. When they first clear cut it, you get a lot of browse that grows up, but once it gets up and, the trees choke out everything underneath, it's just, there's nothing there for them. So basically all it is bedding area. So and you try to penetrate that compared to stuff that you guys got. I mean, it is thick as a wicker basket down here. So really these deer down here seem to be just totally nocturnal. So you've got to keep the pressure way off of them and then pull them out. But yes, it is a huge advantage to have hardwood bottoms. They can't penetrate that as far as forestry. Once they get near, it's called stream side management zones. You can only go like within 100 yards of a creek. So anything around the creek bottoms and stuff, we'll find us several white oaks and stuff like that. And that's where you go, for your morning hunts or your, like during the rut. We don't really have a rut down here. It's basically real gray. It starts around the 25th of October and goes till February. That's the way our rut is down here. It certainly is not like the Midwest where you have a 2-week run and that's your rut. It's not like that down here. So we'll still have deer making scrapes in the first part of turkey season here. So it's silly. But we do hunt that when we can. It just seems like every time you try to penetrate those areas, you set yourself back 3 weeks on all of your afternoon spots and stuff. So what I've adapted to, or my opinion, not to say that I'm a whiz at it or anything, is just like watch your cameras and keep the pressure like extremely low, and let the deer tell you when to go in after them. And then I'll have some spots like if you just, there's sometimes you just want to go hunt because you just want to go have a good morning sit. Whether you think it's a good thing or not, I'll have some spots that I think are not where I would want to go if I was really going to kill, one of my target bucks, and I'll go just to have a sit, maybe see a few does and might have a buck come by, but I'll just go enjoy the sit because you wanted to go. But I'm not going in the area that I really think I could kill him because I don't want to screw him up for a time when I had a higher percentage chance of killing him.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite state to hunt in?
Probably Kansas. Yeah, it's
Kansas. Yeah.
probably Kansas. Yeah, it's Oklahoma's pretty good as well. Oklahoma hunts a lot like Kansas, but I like Kansas. Iowa's good too, but yeah, probably Kansas, Iowa, Oklahoma, like that. But I enjoy them all. I just love whitetails from the standpoint of, you know, you can hunt them in a lot of states, and every state is different in your tactics. You know, to me, it seems like, you know, Ohio is a Midwest state, but as far as having large tracts of land, it's not like Kansas or Iowa, meaning like it's a bunch of 100-acre tracts. It seems like there are bigger tracts by all means, but you know what I'm saying, guys. Y'all can relate to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure.
So it's a bunch of, you know, 50 and 100-acre tracts, whereas like Iowa, you got 3, 4, 5, 600-acre tracts or more. So Illinois is a good state too, but man, I'm so snake bit in Illinois. I can't even kill a cockroach in Illinois.
Me
for
too.
some-
I've gone what 5 or 6 times now and nothing. I can't. Seems like everything goes wrong once I cross that border into Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, I've killed a few, but as far as time in a tree stand, I have spent some time there. It is definitely my lowest percentage state.
I would agree with that. Well, coming close to the end of time here, kind of wrapping it up. What is the next steps for Bone Collector with you and the guys? What does the future look like?
Man, honestly, you know, we're so grateful to still keep doing what we're doing. We've, you know, I think we've almost outran our expiration date. We figured we'd do this for 3 or 4 years and then on to the next thing. So we're real appreciative of, you know, folks still put some eyeballs on us. You know, it's a transition in time right now. I know you guys can see that, you know,
Oh, yeah.
television, digital media, social media. We're real blessed to, you know, have a pretty good foot in the door in all of those. So we're just kind of laying in the weeds and seeing which way we need to go, you know, whenever it gets to that point to transition as to, you know, which way we're going to go. Still doing the, you know, the same things. Of course, you know, things that I'm doing is I'm not able to travel as much as I used to. And I've got a few hunts lined up this year, but we're doing good. Licensing is, you know, good for us. And we're just still clicking right along and super appreciative that folks still, you know, follow us. We don't ever like to say that. You'd mentioned before talking about like professional hunters or whatever. We don't ever like to be classified as that. It's just, we're just like everybody else out there. We just happen to have a camera document and that's it. So there's a lot better hunters out there than we are. We're just appreciative that, you know, folks feel like they're sharing camp with us or inspired to, you know, hopefully they say, man, those guys are having a good time. That's just like our group of guys, you know? So that's the way we hope people view what we've got going on and hope we're flying the flag. You know, we use the word brotherhood, but, you know, I think you guys alluded to that. It is a brotherhood. I mean, all of us, you know, you see a guy in Walmart with a camouflage hat and it's almost like, you know, how you drop your hand down riding a Harley Davidson, you know,
Yeah.
like,
Yep.
you know, that guy gets me. I
Yeah,
get that guy,
exactly.
you know, if he needs some help, I'm going to help him out. You know, it's just
Yeah.
unspoken. We know that, you know, we're from the same brotherhood.
Also with the hunting industry, Travis, you know this as well as I do. You know, the guys out there, it's such a small industry, and people think it's this huge industry. But then when you get there, like the host of our show came out one day, and he's like, you know, when I first went to the ATA show, I thought the carpet was 3 inches tall. You know, and then but now as it's gone on, it's just you realize, okay, there's not that many people out there, and a lot of these guys are just like every one of us. You know, they just happen to be in a different spotlight because of someone they knew or how much work they put into it. But there's a couple jerks out there as well, as you know. But for the most part, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
You know, it's good people.
We know
Yeah,
a couple of them.
You're exactly right. See, it is a small industry, and you know, before you know, don't ever want to burn any. Well, you just don't want to do this in life. That's just a good life moral lesson. You don't want to burn any bridges or anything because it is such a small industry. And you know, by all means, we don't want to have any squabbles between us because you know, in the big scheme of things, you know, as far as you know, population goes, there's a lot more people that would like us not hunting than us hunting. So you know, as far as
Amen.
the bickering, you shot a crossbow, you shot a recurve, you know, this, that, and the other. We don't need that. We need to stand together, and if it's legal, we need to support it no matter what.
Absolutely.
Well, I think you guys, I was going
Absolutely.
to say before, I think you guys do a great job at Travis, just that real factor. I mean, I know for all of us guys together, we get together and hunt, just doing it real. And I think when you guys, you know, you watch your videos and you see the personalities, you see Michael, you see yourself interacting with guys, you're just having a good time. You know, you're not out to do a specific goal. You're out to have a good time and have fun. I think that resonates with everybody. So thank you guys for that a lot.
Yeah, the cherry on top is the critter. Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
the rest of it's the meat and
Real
potatoes.
deal.
You know?
Hey, I got a quick story about Travis. If we have a couple seconds.
Oh yeah.
Back when I first met him, we were at the ATA show. I believe it was 2018 or 2019, not sure. Anyway, and so the sales lady for what used to be Glory Knock, now Halo Knock, she was asking me, okay, who are all the famous people? I want to meet some people. And, of course, I talked about the Bone Collector guys and went back to the hotel, and she wanted to watch videos and all that other stuff. Well, anyway, it just so happened we were coming out one night, and Michael came out, and we were talking to Michael and getting pictures taken and everything. And then Travis comes along, and man, Crystal drops away from Michael and runs over and sees Travis coming. She says, I want some of that. And old Travis started cracking up going, she says she wants some of this. You remember that, Travis? Oh my gosh, we had so much fun that night. It was hilarious.
You know what? I get that 5 times a day from women. It's hard to remember.
That's funny.
It's good stuff, man.
Yeah,
that's
Good
awesome.
stuff.
That's funny. Well, Travis, thank you again. This has been an honor. I know you are an idol for a lot of us out there, and just an amazing representation in the archery industry. So we thank you and your team for that. Keep the little videos going on tech tips and all that. They're fantastic. And the more you can do with that, I think is and get your knowledge base out there. I mean, I'm a nobody, but it's pretty awesome to see and to look back on. So thank you for all you do, and hopefully we'll get to talk again soon.
Man, guys, thank you for having me on here. And, like you guys in y'all's part of the world, just keep flying that flag, man, and have a good time. Let's celebrate everything that has to do with the outdoors. And again, I appreciate you having me on there. And Noel's been hitting me up a couple of times, and I'm glad we finally got to do it. And I'll be glad to do it again.
Absolutely. We appreciate it.
Appreciate
Thank
it,
you so
brother.
much.